Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3642. Today's date is October 14, 2025. It's been almost like a night at 9:42 p.m. All right, we just directly jump into the question. Let's go. All right. Okay. Yeah. Question is, what if dinosaur survive to the modern era? Oh, that is a really good question. What if a dinosaur survive in modern era? What would be world look like? Okay, there are a couple of things need to understand first. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Okay, yeah. What if question is always kind of like a very interested way to give the answer. It's kind of like force you to think about that reality and try to create that reality inside your mind. Also, disclaimer, the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. It's a kind of like something that I'm just try to explain whatever inside in my mind and try to explain. Okay, yeah. So if you need any kind of like information, do not rely on this. Okay, yeah. Check on the internet and lot of stuff. We have a lot of resources that you can verify. So the information that I'm trying to tell you is not verified. It's just raw, unfiltered. All right. I'm just trying to give my opinion regarding about that. All right. Yeah. You already get all the disclaimer and things like that. Should we proceed? All right. Let's go. Now, question is that what if dinosaur survive in kind of like assembly? Like basically, dinosaurs are supposed to be alive in the modern world. Then probably what would be the world look like? Well, this is something that a very different question. Okay, yeah. And let me give you context. Oh yeah, we are actually exist. The human civilization is actually exist is because of dinosaur is not exist. Like it's because of dinosaur is not actually exist. That's why we are kind of like able to survive. That's why we are able to kind of like improve our human civilization and things like that. Dinosaur, if the dinosaur would be available, then probably there is no human. Like possibly there is no human, like there is no other animals. Like basically, let me tell you one thing now. When the Jurassic Park, when the Jurassic World, okay, in Jurassic era, in that particular Jurassic era, almost like a 150 million years of, in that particular, there is no species. Okay, only the dinosaurs are actually available. Multiple species of dinosaurs. Some dinosaur can swim, fly, kind of like assembly. Like they at that time there is no lion, there is no bear, there is nothing really at all. Like basically, besides dinosaur, very less other kind of like a something species should supposed to be survive at that time. Because probably is this thing that dinosaurs are very carnivorous and probably kind of like a somebody survive other species is very dangerous. Because how it should supposed to be, I don't know, like I'm not really sure about this information, but probably I think that when the dinosaur would be exist na, then like very less kind of like species would be kind of like somebody exist over that period of time. Might be kind of like some species would be exist. Such species are kind of like somebody like a living in kind of like underground or things like that. Those species kind of like survive in the Jurassic world, but rest of the species, I don't really think that. Definitely not. Oh yeah, I don't really think that kind of like any other kind of like species would supposed to be survive in the Jurassic world. Probably not. Definitely not. Because I don't know, dude. It's like that na ki those animals, those Jurassic, those dinosaurs are very dangerous in every possible ways. Okay, yeah. Like if I'm gonna say the tiger and lion are kind of like a very carnivorous animal, they are kind of like somebody eating alive and things like that. But probably if I'm gonna say the lion and tiger, they are not really that much kind of like something scary as compared to a dinosaur. Because let me tell you one thing now, the the tiger is equivalent to kind of like a simply height of our human. Okay, yeah, probably. Okay, I'm not really sure, but what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that when the carnivorous animal is bigger, then probably that became more dangerous, okay, than such a carnivorous which is kind of like a small. So if I'm gonna say that a lion and tiger are bit more kind of like a simply less scarier than dinosaur, because dinosaur is a very big. The average height of the dinosaur probably 10 feet. Average height, like not average height. This is the minimum height probably. Okay, 10 feet, and from 10 feet to kind of like a 25 to 30, and then 200, and there is a lot of things probably like some of the dinosaur are kind of like only way much kind of like a taller and things like that. By the way, at that time there is a kind of like a simply vegetarian dinosaur should supposed to be exist. The vegetarian dinosaur means like that those dinosaurs are kind of like a simply rely on, they are eating like a basically the leaves and things are kind of like a something, and those are dinosaur exist, but those dinosaurs are really big, like a two-story building, three-story building, like a massive, almost like a 300-400 feet heighted. It was like a really massive dinosaur. So if I'm trying to imagine that reality where dinosaur kind of like simply exist with our life, then what would be that? First of all, it's very hard to imagine that dinosaur and human are kind of like a living together. It's very, yeah. And in this particular scenario, dinosaur always gonna win because it's a dinosaur. Okay, yeah. Like basically compared to the dinosaur, we can't run faster, we can't fly, we can't do that, we can't protect ourselves in any possible way from dinosaur. We don't really have any kind of like a fur, we can't kind of like a camouflage, we can't do anything at all as compared to surviving our body. We just have a kind of like a small brain, and that's why we are kind of like utilizing it. But still it's kind of like a very hard, okay, because at the beginning of the human life we don't really develop the modern technology. No, nothing at all. We are kind of like rely on tools and kind of like a simply hunter gatherer techniques and stuff like that. But still, if I'm trying to imagine that a human should supposed to be exist with the dinosaur, then what would be that? The first important factor for human is that they need to be kind of like somebody make sure they are safe from the dinosaur. So probably we are kind of like simply improve such a technique or improve kind of like simply such a way that we might gonna kill the dinosaur. Okay, yeah, like basically is this thing that we kind of like invented some sort of tools for kind of like survive, because in our reality we actually invented tool for kind of like simply for like a cutting or things for that. But in this particular reality where dinosaur exists, we are kind of like invented tool far earlier, because it's became very necessary for us. Because of that, without those tools we won't be able to survive. So we need to make those tools as fast, as sharp, as quick. Okay. Another thing is that probably is this thing, we are kind of like something really good at kind of like something hunting the dinosaur. Because let me tell you one thing, if I'm gonna say that the dinosaur should supposed to be exist, that means each dinosaur is a kind of like a very big animal. Okay, yeah. And if we wanted to hunt the dinosaur, obviously we need a kind of like a careful amount of planning and kind of like executions and things like that. Obviously we need kind of like somebody more than 2-3 like 10 people are kind of like somebody execute to capture the one dinosaur, which is kind of like a far more crazier. Okay, yeah. But still we might kind of learn that thing. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that there is a very less food shortage. Like basically we actually kill the dinosaur, then we have kind of like a food for almost like a month, because the dinosaur is like a really big animal and things like that. Another stuff is that um, because of kind of like a simply we are human and we can't run that faster and things like that. So because of we are kind of like simply try to prevent ourselves in every possible way. So we are kind of like a simply make sure we are kind of like a simply live in such an environment where everything should supposed to be protected. Like basically we should supposed to be live in caves and things like that. Now this is kind of like something very much crazy because of that ki our human civilization are kind of like a simply not live that much amount of time in a cave. Okay, we kind of like a build the shelter and we kind of like most of the life are kind of like a live in open ground and things like that. But if I'm in this reality, we might not went into outside because outside is a kind of like far more dangerous. So most of the human civilization will gonna exist underground or kind of like something inside the caves or things like that. Another thing is that the farming. Okay, yeah, we might not invented the farming because still farming is a far more dangerous. And if you kind of like went outside, then probably it was far more dangerous because the rest of the thing is kind of like filled with a lot of dinosaurs and things like that. So obviously farming is not gonna happen. But there is no food shortages by the way because of that key we already have so many dinosaurs. Okay, we just kind of like assembly train our kind of like assembly people for almost like a 10-50 people to kind of like assembly gather the dinosaur, like capture the dinosaur and kind of like assembly bring the dinosaur to the cave, and probably we could kind of like assembly eat that dinosaur for a month. Yeah. Another thing is that we would kind of like invented fire so early. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so early because most of the time we are kind of like spending inside the cave. We don't really have a kind of like a light. So fire is the only way that we could kind of like a essential for light and things like that. Okay, entire human civilization are kind of like some live underground because of that key dinosaur and things like that. Because of this thing, uh, it kind of like some change happened. Okay, yeah, because we don't really get that much amount of sunlight, and when we are not getting that much amount of sunlight, our kind of like a body kind of like a shapes very differently. Okay, yeah, it means that na ki like basically our pupil would be kind of like much more bigger because of that ki most of the time we are kind of like living in a underground or caves or things like that. So we need to kind of like see so many stuff. Now because of kind of like having less amount of light, so probably our pupil should supposed to be went bigger. What's a pupil? A pupil is that ki it's a kind of like a lens in the camera. Okay, yeah, when you improve the aperture or like a kind of like open the aperture, it kind of like open up the kind of like space, and more light came inside the sensor so that you can capture so much amount of light and things like that. Same thing happened in our eyes. Okay, yeah, like basically what exactly happened, that when there is so much dark, our pupil is kind of like a went much bigger, and when there is too much light, our pupil is kind of like a went shorter. Okay, yeah. But because of kind of like in this reality we are kind of like simply living in underground most of the time, so our eyes would be kind of like simply adopt such a upgrade that we should supposed to be seen lot of kind of like a stuff in dark. Okay, yeah, like yeah, like we should supposed to see lot of stuff in dark because of that key. Like basically this thing that key, it's our civilization, like we don't really have that much amount of light, and fire is kind of like a very luxury item, cannot exist everywhere. Okay, so probably our eyes should supposed to be evolved in such a way that we should supposed to see everything in a dark. Okay, yeah. uh, Another thing is that because of kind of like some dinosaur exist, we are kind of like somebody always have a kind of like a dangerous situation. So probably what should we supposed to do is that we're gonna making sure that um, our kind of like a generation should supposed to be exist or things like that. So we are kind of like a train ourselves, or we are trying to train ourselves to how to capture and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that if this kind of like some if I kind of like run into that future, then probably the human civilization will not gonna exist that much amount of time. Because let me tell you one thing na ki still is this thing, we are still human and we can't do anything at all. We don't really have anything at all. Okay, yeah, but dinosaur has so many things. Like basically first of all is that for dinosaur we are really good food for them. Yeah, legitimately very good food for them, because we are so tasty because we don't really have any fur or we don't really have anything at all. So basically is this thing like it's for them, it's a kind of like a simply chicken dinner for them. Okay. And basically instead of killing other kind of like some animal, they are kind of like try to make sure that they should supposedly focus on killing the human. Okay. And also the dinosaur have a really good instinct regarding about smelling, like they are really good smellers, like they are kind of like understand the smells and things and that. And probably if I'm kind of like looking at all the possible ways, human cannot able to survive that. Nah, like basically if we do not kind of like invented farming, then probably there is nothing really at all. Like most of the civilization are kind of like exist underground and that's it probably. And one day or another we might gonna end because dinosaur is out there and they are kind of like gonna kill us every single time. And basically is this thing that the human civilization are kind of like evolved according to the kind of like a scenario that he was seeing, like a river outside, like things like that. If the dinosaurs actually exist, then probably we don't really have privilege to go outside. And if we are not getting outside, then how do we supposed to evolve? And if we are not evolved, then what is actually matter of kind of like being human being and things like that? Nothing really at all. So if I'm kind of like a look about every possible way that humans should supposed to survive, in the end, dinosaur is winning at that moment. Because dinosaur is really good at everything. They can run faster, they can smell really good, they can kind of like somebody eat us every single time. Like we became kind of like very vulnerable in front of them. And basically if I'm trying to think about killing any kind of like dinosaur, if humans are kind of like develop the skills regarding about the like a communication and kind of like a way that they hunt the dinosaur and things like that in every good possible way, it's still not gonna possible. Like let me tell you one thing now, the skin of the dinosaur is kind of like a far more thicker than bow and arrow cannot penetrate that. How do we supposed to do that thing? If we kind of like invented such a tool, we need a very strong kind of like a force to kill them or kind of like a penetrate inside of them. And after all those things, dinosaur might not get hurt because for them it just kind of like a scratch and things like that. So in every possible way, dinosaur is like a very very difficult to hunt, very very difficult. Yeah, probably. So I don't know, dude. Okay, yeah, if I'm kind of like basically I didn't really come into the modern world because like there is no modern world, there is no modern world would gonna exist when the dinosaur will gonna exist with us. Definitely not, because if we not get outside, how do we supposed to improve ourselves? How do we supposed to? Nah, definitely not. Like let me tell you, if I'm kind of like simply create another scenario regarding about Jurassic movie. Okay, yeah, in the Jurassic movie, kind of like some sort of mad scientist is kind of like a regenerate the dinosaur, like a recreate the dinosaur and things like that. Now in the kind of like a particular part, there is a kind of like some dinosaur, almost like hundreds of dinosaur in all around the world. Even if we have kind of like all the weaponry and things and that and all those stuff, we can't even kind of like kill those animal because those animal are really good at every possible ways, dude. Like basically you like basically when you start knowing about the dinosaur, you just don't really know about the dinosaur. Like basically you just might gonna know T-Rex or you just might gonna know kind of like somebody dinosaur would kind of like somebody walk on two leg and kind of like a two leg is like, but there are millions of species of dinosaur, millions of species. Some dinosaur can camouflage like a basically lizard. Some dinosaur are kind of like a somebody really good swimmer, they can swim really like a really great. Okay, some dinosaur can fly and they can fly really good. Okay, some dinosaur are kind of like somebody really good at hunting or things. Like basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, the entire kind of like somebody evolution happened in dinosaur in so many ways. In like basically let me tell you one thing, if I'm gonna say that who actually rule the planet earth, I'm gonna say dinosaur, because dinosaur actually rule more than 100 million years, more than 100 million years. Like basically is this thing that we are human actually survive just a million year, that's it, just a 1 million year. But dinosaur actually survive for more than 100 million, more than. So and in this particular period of timeline, dinosaur kind of like assembly evolved with multiple upgrades and multiple kind of like assembly evolutions and things and that and all those stuff. Dinosaur really good at kind of like hunting, really good at killing animals. In front of them, we are just nothing really at all. Even if we kind of like have modern weapons and things and that, it's far more crazier than that. No, like definitely not. Okay, so still, okay, yeah. Like I'm trying to being really realistic, trying to be realistic. Like I'm not saying that ki dinosaur is very kind of like some wild animal. Yeah, like somewhat something really wild animal too. But the dinosaur and human cannot live in one single planet. Definitely not. In the future, when there is a kind of like some scientist, kind of like a somebody de-extinct the dinosaur. What's a de-extinct? De-extinction is a kind of like a term called kind of like a somebody extinction means like a like a basically mammoth are extinction like a they are not exist. De-extinction means like that we are kind of like a somebody came out from the like basically we reborn, we created the dinosaur, not a kind of like a artificial way, no, in biological ways too, yes, yeah, but if kind of like a somebody any kind of like a somebody scientist kind of like a invented, not invented, kind of like a somebody evolved the dinosaur and things like that, can that dinosaur should supposed to be exist with us? I am not really sure about that. Okay, I'm a bit really kind of like curious about the dinosaur, yes, but still is I'm not really sure because the information that I have regarding about dinosaur is not exactly, I don't know, yeah. So from every possible way, if I'm kind of like a think about that ki dinosaur should supposed to be exist with us in modern world, it's not possible. There is no modern world. If the dinosaur exists, there is no modern world. Nothing really at all. So yeah, so this is it. This is it. I was supposed to be in here. And thank you.